a sub-regional movement with Suriname, right? Based on Indian parties. So they've always been kind of anti-CARICOM and anti-national. And the United States, from my reading, see them as much more pliable when it comes to Caribbean and Guyanese nationalism. And so feels, in my estimation, much more comfortable with them in this era of oil. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well,
you're not hearing you.
Yes, now we hear you. You can ask the professor anything you wish to ask him, you know.
You guys, Dr. Hines, thank you for that excellent presentation. I was holding on to every word you said. I never get tired listening to you, brother. Never. But when Dr. Hines was talking, I was recalling one of our evening sessions here when the elections was coming up. And I told you all, the party who Exxon wants to win will win. You all remember that?
Yes, I remember.
Okay. I think Jerry was alive.
Yeah.
Yes? Because once you're going there with the oil, that's it. They find oil.
Yeah. And that kind of reserve is
and it's perfect. It's not just the oil, you know. The oil and the location vis-a-vis Venezuela is perfect for them. Staging area for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But depends on how you look at it. It will have to be a balancing thing because Russia and China are there too.
And they are not going to sit in the background and let the US just...
No. Those days, no. It didn't happen in 1962 either, you know. Russia didn't just back off with the ships, you know. Kennedy pulled back the rockets too, pointing at Russia. So
From
Kennedy
Turkey.
wasn't from Turkey.
Yes.
So yeah.
Wow.
This is a very gripping moment in history for this region, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the way you see when Mr. Trump met with a selected group of Caribbean prime ministers, all of that was part and parcel of the exercise of dismemberment.
But CARICOM is so divided. Anybody who wants to divide the nations, just listen to them and they say, oh, that one is for Venezuela. Oh, that one is for this. That one is for that. And they know exactly where to come in and plant the seeds. We do not have a united front as CARICOM.
And we won't.
We easy pickings.
Not with these people, as David says. Those fellows 40 and 50 years ago had a regional vision.
Mm-hmm.
The leadership of the region. And unfortunately, the body politic seems to be bereft of vision.
Oh,
our vision is what's coming on the TV tonight, or the next scandal, or the next whatever it is. Not the region.
Individuals, man. Individuals.
Yes.
What it's all about. You know, I'm wondering, Professor, if it makes any sense for Jamaica to continue for oil, owing to the fact that we might end up like Guyana.
Yeah. That's a big debate. That's a really big debate. In Guyana, whether in fact the oil should not be left in the ground. But it's you know, given our history and where we come from, we can't take that position. You know, I think Dwyer is right. I mean, it's not just the politicians come out of the society, you know. That's where they recruited. That's where they recruited from. And I think that's where, if there has to be a rescue act, that's where it has to begin, at the level of the people. I mean, for full disclosure, Dwyer said he's been listening to me. I used to listen to Dwyer 20 years ago, Dwyer, or 30 years ago, we would belong to this part of this television program out of Washington, D.C. called Carib Nation.
Yeah.
Come to the Caribbean, and we used to come to St. Kitts a lot when Dwyer was an active politician. And he used to be Minister of Tourism, and I interviewed him a couple of times and so on. And I used to listen to him. And I think up to that time, I thought that there was still hope in the Caribbean for really developing a kind of leadership that speaks to our needs first and foremost, rather than the needs of others. But I have to say, 20 years on, I am not optimistic at all. I can't see it.
I agree.
You remember the night we argued bitterly on Mekucha because I said that the Black movement was hijacked. We are not seeing the benefits of it this day. And yeah, we had a fun argument on Mekucha that night.
Okay.
Those who came after those leaders in the 70s and those who had a sense who put the federation together, even though it didn't last. Those who came after them is like they look at it and say, why all these years these guys fighting up? I go and look out for myself.
But that, Beverly, that has been encouraged institutionally and individually too, you know. That has been encouraged by the West. To hell with the crowd, look after yourself. All right, that has been encouraged. So it's become now systematized. It's systemic. Selfishness is systemic.
Institutionalized, you know.
Yes.
I spoke with a young man who is in training to become a lawyer. Hopefully he'll be called to the bar soon. He has promise at this stage. But he is just getting in a position where he has to work closely with the public servants and other institutions. And the young man is amazed at the level of corruption and fighting and all the things. And we have to warn him and say, you're just seeing the smoke. You see, you don't even get into the fire yet.
Good evening.
Hi, Cyrus.
Good evening, everyone. And Professor David Innes, this is a very good subject you are talking about. Last Saturday, I was invited by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ghana. They made a press release about the border situation and with Venezuela, and they show us a map. And then on the map, I saw Isla La Ochila, Oquia or La Ochila, but this is Spanish. This is an island close to Venezuela and a deep sea area. Because when I look at it on the Google Earth, I see the sea very, very blue. You can see it very blue. And then I think that, and I say, oh my God, the situation is more dangerous, more important than we can think about it, because this is a Russian, Venezuelan and Russian Navy base. And I think that when you look at the map, you see that all the Caribbean and the Caribbean Sea for those ships like submarine You see those little islands, the small island like Grenada, Barbados, all those islands, they make you can they represent a problem for a submarine base, because when you have to go through those small islands, the enemy can detect you when you are crossing. You understand? Because they are very close and also they are not too deep. But what I realize when I see the Venezuela, the border Venezuela is trying try to take from Guyana, that will give Venezuela access directly on the Pacific Ocean. This is a geostrategic issue with Russia, United States, and I think that this is a big, big, big issue. I mean, more important than the Caribbean. That I think that Guyana and Venezuela is under global influence, and then they are going to play on the international conflict, understand? Just to try to get control and defend their interests, which is military and economically.
Heavily, may I ask Professor Hines a question? David,
Yeah.
given the increasing importance of renewable energy, how long is this explosive situation in the Guyana-Venezuela area likely to last? Because Janet is talking about whether they should continue exploring for oil in Jamaica.
Yeah.
My answer to her would be, quite apart from averting a potential invasion of one form or another, it's healthier to go solar or go wind, because that is the path of the world.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm no economist, but I don't see in the long run, in the long term, I don't see much of a place for fossil fuels. It will always have a place, but not the place that it has. And it will also, in my opinion, affect the geopolitics of the Middle East.
Yeah. I think you're on.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're on spot. I think you're on spot there. And you know, that is the debate. They've been having it in Trinidad before Guyana found oil.
Yeah.
And it's beginning to gain speed in Guyana. Of course, the problem is we are a poor region, and
Yes.
you know, the temptation
Yes.
for the wealth. I mean, the wealth that could come from Guyana could eradicate poverty in the entire English-speaking Caribbean.
Oh yes, quickly.
Quickly. The contract that they signed is bad, partly because once they found the oil, they needed to get done in there as quickly as possible before the Venezuelans move. Right? So Exxon took advantage of that whole contract. But Dwight, as you would know, I mean, contracts inevitably change over time. You sign a contract based on the circumstances, and it changes over time. After 15 years, Guyana gets 50% of the profits, and that would be a lot of money.
Yes.
By which time, of course, a lot of damage could be done to the environment. In those 15 years, all right? And the liability for a lot of the damage lies with Guyana. That's in the contract.
I was about to just say that, you know, and I'm also saying, who said we're going to find so much oil 15 years later?
Right. Yeah.
That's truly right.
Yeah. And what the Guyana government did, the one that got power, they set up this national resource fund in which they bank money in an American bank. It was supposed to be in the Bank of Guyana, but they bank it in an American bank, right? And you can't touch that money. You got to go through all kind of parliamentary maneuvers. And they say they're saving money for rainy days. No, we have had rainy days from the time of the Middle Passage. I mean, what are you telling me? You look around the Caribbean and you see rainy days are now. We don't know what will happen 15 years from now. We don't know what today's money will cost 50 years from now. But again, it's the lack of vision. That's why I'm saying these people have no sense of history. You have to tell them, but rain been falling and wetting we from the Middle Passage, right? You put it in American bank. And when the Americans were about to kick them out of office, the American put sanctions on them. And part of the sanction is if you hold on to that money, if you stay in power, you're not spending it. These jackasses. Excuse me.
Yeah. That's why when you said this region is poor, I would qualify it by saying we make ourselves poor.
Yeah.
We squander our resources, we make bad investment choices, we lack vision, which is the crux of it. We can't see development together as a region.
No.
It's a skelter all over the place, running around like headless chickens after. See, this weekend Grenada is marking 47 years of independence. And as a region that is counting off the years of independence, what except squander resources and I don't know, we just make some bad and because of the nature of the politics that we have developed, people like yourself and Dwyer and Young Guevara and other people who would have something positive to offer, not going anywhere near the politics, staying far from it. So we have to throw out the current type of politics that we have and bring something different, totally different, to get some of our brightest and ablest people to step up to the plate and say they'll do something. Because what is happening now, it's ridiculous. When you hear the level of debate in our parliaments, when you have prime ministers who can sit down in news conferences talking about how they can do things more than a young boy, and prime ministers in parliament talking about people only spending time on Facebook and watching Trini porn. That is the level of debate in our parliaments and among our people in positions of leadership. So sensible people not going to want to associate with that. So they keep surrounding themselves with the lackeys and the yes men, from whom can come no vision. And we keep sliding down the slippery slope. But we have to take back this Caribbean. We really have to. We can't, because what's going to happen to our children?
Yeah.
I'm a mother. I hope to be a grandmother someday, and we have...
Gara, take the hint. Gara, you taking the hint?
No, she married already. That's why I sing it.
Oh.
But they're not listening to me at all. They're in their own world.
That's all right. They're right.
Yeah, she, I can't imagine she made Janet become showing off granddaughter before me. Not right. So we have our generations coming. We can't mash up the Caribbean and then leave them in all of the mess.
But Bev, we discussed this almost ad nauseum.
And we'll continue.
Have we paved the road to the future properly? is our education and social development system the correct one for us? Is it relevant? Are we training people in science and technology and research and development? Why everybody want to be a lawyer? Why aren't they fired by law? I mean, Guevara's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, but I mean, well, let's move on.
Why would you educate our people that will be able to think for themselves?
Exactly. That's why we should do it.
And yeah, that's the issue.
That's exactly why you do it.
Why would you educate them?
To end an enslavement, which today, in the opinion of many people, is perhaps worse than the one before.
It is worse.
That's exactly why you will not.
In the minds of many people, but not in the minds of many of our leaders. And I think that's the point. A lot of them depend upon keeping the population at its basic, so as to hold on to power.
They love poor people.
And unable to think for yourself. The idea of being dependent, not only for material things, but also in an intellectual way. There's no, nobody is allowed to think for themselves and come up with any ideas. Any problem you need solving, come to my office and I would solve it for you.
Exactly. And they like to present themselves as someone who is all knowledgeable. Whatever you need to know, I say so. It's like
the minute we get elected, we become omniscient.
Guevara's minister will say, "But I just told you," as if when I tell you something, that's it. This is the Lord speaking. There can be no other doctrine.
Gospel.
But it's working. Bev, it's working. And that's the tragedy. That is the tragedy. It's working.
Yeah.
It's working.
But I always refer to what gives me hope. Like that young man I mentioned earlier, who is on his way to becoming a lawyer, he gives me hope. When I listen to
somebody's phone is ringing.
Not Melania's phone.
Yeah, Melania's.
Yes, when I listen to people being interviewed saying things like, "I do not want any handout, all I want is this, so I can go and make a life for myself and the family." When I see, even on the street people who say, "Look, I don't want any handout, I want to work, this is what I can do. I can do some domestic work, I can do something, give me some work. I don't want any handout." Those kind of things give me hope, because at least it tells you that there are people in the society who recognize that running to politicians to pay a light bill this month and then you have to run back next month, it's just not the way to live. And we need back some of that African pride. We need to get back some of what is going back in the day. We need to.
Well, you see, Beverly?
Yes.
I've said it here already too, and I hope you all don't get upset with me saying this. In every one of these countries, Grenada is celebrating its 47th anniversary. But it seems to me that in every one of these countries, the night we pulled down the Union Jack and hoisted our own flag, we thought the battle was finished. We didn't realize that is when the work really started.
Exactly.
That's when the work started. Bradshaw said that, our former leader, our first national hero, said that in a speech at Mona a few years before he died in the 1970s. And some people seemed not to understand him. He says, "Let me tell you something. As a colony or a place with internal self-rule, you're working for somebody else. When you hoist your flag, it's you. You got to do it."
Of course.
And look at what happened. Listen, we need to bring back Walter Rodney from the dead. He needs to write this book, David, or better, you write it. How post-independent Caribbean leaders underdeveloped the Caribbean.
Caribbean, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if Walter shouldn't have to come back, we should all
But David could write it.
take a chapter.
David
Make we
could,
chat.
could write that on the weekend. You haven't received it already. But that's the story. Our leadership has betrayed us, not let us down, but has betrayed us.
That's right.
They've sold us out.
But we've gone along for the ride.
They have, because when they initially come to us as an electorate, they're also humble and make the world of promises as if they're going to do better for us. And then from the day the elections are done, it's a whole different story. And so you hear, for example, leading up to an election, that all is well. The economy is doing so well, and people believe that. And then after the election, you're told rough months ahead. Things like that.
Rough months
I'm
ahead.
going to give you an example, but before I go to my example, there's a very bad feedback. I'm not sure which one
It's mine.
Oh, it's yours. Okay.
Yes. I have a faulty computer.
Oh, Lord.
Let me turn it off.
Is it Chinese?
I was doing an interview with a woman today who had lost her job a year ago as a result of the pandemic. And she went to her member of parliament's office after the elections. And the woman in the office asked her who she voted for. When she went and asked for help, the woman's response was, who you vote for? So she said, who I vote for, but that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the member of parliament is the representative from my constituency and that I'm in need. The woman said she can't help her if she can't tell her who she voted for. Oh, I should speak English for those. She cannot tell her. She can't help her if she cannot tell her who she voted for. So she said, well, I didn't vote.
Oh, that's
what she said. I didn't vote.
Even worse.
Yeah, that's even worse.
Yes.
That's even worse.
And that's an interesting story, because we hear about those things happening in St. Vincent, for example, where senior civil servants and even politicians themselves would inquire as to people who are seeking help, who they've voted for. And you turn your nose upon it and think, well, what is really wrong with Vincentian? But then it's clearly a problem across the region, isn't it? Mm-hmm. This idea of who you voted for, and you can't survive, you can't eat if you didn't support me. Mm-hmm. It's terrible. It's really bad as a people. Sometimes you wonder if we shouldn't have just stayed under the colonial man.
No.
I don't agree. I don't agree, but it's true. Sometimes you have to wonder.
No.
Yeah, I don't agree either, obviously.
People have failed us miserably.
Listen, if people
our institutions have failed us, university has failed us.
Yeah. If people survive for hundreds of years under the yoke of enslavement and colonialism, they could run their own country. There's enough wisdom, experience, intelligence, ability, courage. When Beverly was using the adjectives, she said ablest and brightest, but she didn't say courageous, most courageous. All of those ingredients exist. It's just that they are not properly aligned. And again, that is because we are institutionally toxic. Things ain't right. They ain't line up right. Like the double helix and the amino acids and the proteins and so, they're not lined up right. And that is by design. That is by design. When you see a politician from, let me call an island X, and I was a politician, so I'm talking take this from the horse's mouth, goes up to London for a conference or something, and some people who want to invest in his, let us presume the minister is a male, decision maker is a male, and want to invest in an oil refinery in the country or some big thing or a 500-room hotel, and they want to win over that minister's support. And he's in a presidential suite in a major hotel with a lot of food and a lot of attractive women, and offers and so forth are made with regard to Swiss accounts and all of these things. This is not movie stuff, you know, this is real stuff, you know. You think they're going to study who down there in Barely catching the ass, as David would say, excuse the bad word? You think they're going to study the person down there in Guave catching hotel? No, they're not. They're going to look after themselves because they figure politics is short, and they're going to make it for themselves because they go in there with that, most of them with that intention of self-aggrandizement. And unfortunately, it is easier to win an election than to be an efficient administrator of a ministry. And that's the problem. They get bribed out. Look at what's happening in Africa with all of those resources. I mean, you got fellas getting $20 million thrown into a Swiss account, US dollars, you know. You think he can study people in his country so who can't get water? He'll give them money. And this is what this cycle we have to break. We are controlled by money and material things. And that really goes against the grain of the history and culture of the people who make up the Caribbean.
Yes, and that's why I mentioned earlier, as I welcome Adriana, that's why I mentioned earlier that we need to get back. We want the generation that has a little of that African pride, you know, little of the nannies and the cudgels and the chatelier and the people who really stood for something. You know, you can't buy them because that just can't happen, you know. Back in the days of slavery, yes, you know, you have yellow belly ones who always run to massa and sell out the other people. You know, but too many of those exist today. We need the field slaves to come back and take over this region.
Can I give you a real example, real quickly?
Yes.
Our government recently signed a deal with a Swiss company. The government is boasting that it doesn't have to put any money into it. The Swiss company is going to build a solar plant to provide 35 megawatts of power, which they will sell to the government-owned electricity company. They say it's costing $71 million. I would question that arithmetic. My argument here is you can generate that equity through equity in St. Kitts and Nevis, and if necessary, you go to debt. There are institutions in the world which will lend you money at 2% and so forth, especially if it is an environmental friendly project, and let the people of the country own. This is a utility. This is not a hotel or a manufacturing or assembly plant. This is a utility. But the government is selling out the people of the country, and the Swiss company, which is in financial trouble, is posting and saying that the St. Kitts project will be highly profitable for them, so that the consumers of St. Kitts will be enriching the people of Switzerland, while the consumers of St. Kitts, who can own that company, which they should own as a utility, remain poor. I mean, come on, man. This is 2021, and our government is doing that now.
And I mean, but look, the government of Grenada, and this is a long story, but the short of it is the recovered ownership of the electricity company here through a court judgment which was handed down. And what a different evening. I'll tell you guys a story about that. But just this week now, I see a news release coming out of the government that they have $218 million from the UAE to build a renewable plant, and they've had this money since 2018.
The government has that money?
It was pledged since 2018.
But how big a plant is that?
And one of the reasons they threw out the former owners of the electricity company was that they were not interested in renewable energy. So as soon as I get the opportunity, I will have to ask one of those citizens, did they bring this to the former owners that we have this money there, can do renewable energy? Or did you just keep it a secret? Because at the end of the day, you just want to get rid of them and take it over. There's a long history behind that. I promise you guys one of these evenings I'll give you the long history of it. But if that money was there since 2018, it accessed to build the renewable energy plant I'm now proposing to build. When I saw this headline, I jumped to go and read the story so fast because I said, wow, Grenlec is not even gone. Well, the former owners of Grenlec not even gone a month good. And we're getting all of this money to go renewable. When I see that it was spread from 2018, I said, no, man. Making sense. No sense to me, at least, because my brain still kind of work. Even though it's slow, it still kind of work.
Are the utilities in your islands privately or publicly owned?
Well, right now, the electricity company is publicly owned. The water company is a statutory body. Flow and Digicel run roughshod over us like else. Yeah, so.
Well, I see water and electricity as national security items, eh?
They are.
First and foremost.
And
I don't want to put that in the hands of any Swiss investor. Not here.
Not at all. People could never and will never have the interest of the country at the core of what they do. Never. No. And those in positions of leadership should know that and don't even entertain conversations with these people.
But, Beverly, when you're talking some large money, the dollar dazzles people's minds, you know.
Yeah.
That is why I said they should not even entertain any conversations with these people, lest they get carried away. Just
carried away in more than one way.
Exactly. So I'm
lot of money.
One of our viewers is saying that about the Swiss account issue that you raised, Dwyer, while we talk about, people in Africa having those sorts of accounts, there are some of our politicians right here in the Caribbean who hold such accounts.
Oh yeah.
Who hold such accounts. So and it is in their interest to hold on to power, I say, to make sure that they can keep those accounts going in one way or another.
Absolutely. And some of them know that the moment they meet office, they may find themselves having to answer some fraud and money laundering charges as well. So
it is very difficult with Switzerland because Switzerland, people's money is locked down very, very hermetically. It's very hard to break through in Switzerland.
Yeah.
The best money laundering in the world is in Switzerland. But you can't launder money only there.
Of course. I am so very happy for the professor and his discussions. This is the kind of thing that having conversations with Professor Hines evokes. You could sit and listen to him and talk with him all night and don't even realize that the night is going. The wealth of information. Personally, I just hang on to every word every time I hear him speak, he just rattles off information and it's just amazing, but it's also very interesting. People like Professor Hines should be playing a bigger role in this region. That is not the type of intellect that our people in leadership position want to associate with.
That's the point.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
point.
yeah.
He knows too much.
So that's
why. And I think that part of what we lack is that we don't have a Caribbean movement. And that's why I like this. I like this because I'm catching up on what's happening in various parts of the region. We don't have a Caribbean movement. You mentioned the Black Power movement, which was a Caribbean movement. And whenever we have made a difference in our region and in our lives, it has been a regional movement. The so-called 1930s, what they call the 1930s riots. I mean,
yeah,
it was a regional thing from
that's right.
Jamaica in the north come right down to the south. And whenever we've moved together, we've been able to make some changes in the circumstances of our people. But I would like to think that rethinking and bringing back a Caribbean right movement, I think is important, but education had a lot to do with it. You know, we no longer have a University of the West Indies, but we have our national universities. With the name the University of the West Indies, and so you're not able to go there and get a Caribbean education, right? Which I think makes a big difference when you do that. But we need a Caribbean-wide movement in order to think, because the politicians like it when St. Lucia becomes St. Lucia, and we engage in our political contestation there without any regard for what's happening around us. And that kind of tunnel vision, I think, has hurt us. And we need movements. I think part of where we have found ourselves after almost 60 years of independence, starting with Jamaica and Trinidad in 62, is that everything now centers around the party.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And we don't have movements and deliver change. I search our history, right? The early changes were brought about by the trade union movement in the 1930s. And if you look at the early leaders, Bradshaw, Gary, and all of them, you know, they came out of the trade union movement.
That's correct.
Political parties are not change agents. And as everyone has been saying, they've become obstacles to change. So that we have to find a way to rekindle movements within our individual countries and to regionalize that movement. This generation is 100 times brighter than us. I mean, what they can do with that cell phone in their hand, right? So there is, we have a lot to work with. The point is, and I keep thinking that every time I spoke to a Caribbean leader up to 20 years ago, they would mention education as a way. And Dwyer referenced it here tonight. If I were to pinpoint one thing that that could restart a way forward is education. But we have some bright economists, but they have no idea about economic thought. So be no idea. And so they would not know that we in the Caribbean generated our own economic activity. So Arthur Lewis comes out. See why Thomas after Brewster, and I can go on, and all of them. That we, that Eric Williams wrote Capitalism and Slavery, everything, that we constructed economic thought for the world. Right? Small. And so you have bright economists, but as Garvey said, they don't know where they come from. Right? And so they end up churning out numbers and no sense of economic thought, no sense of economics and civilization, and economics and development. Right? Comes finance and money. Right? So perhaps it's education. And these days, I don't think that that we should rely only on the formal education system. In a sense, what we're doing here tonight is education, right? And we have to be intentional about it. I mean, if you are some small islands in terms of space, you have to be intentional about telling your story. That we mentioned, Rodney, that Europe and European wealth and European development could not happen without this Caribbean. Right? The important role that Haiti played in French wealth. And then after the Asian Revolution, the sugar from Cuba played in terms of Spain, and Brazil played in Portugal. Yeah, we have to tell our stories, and we have to tell it from our perspective. I usually tell my students, don't come to me with no objectivity. Don't. My objectivity arises from my environment, where I come from, and what I'm interested in. That's my objectivity. So there's a Caribbean objectivity that we have to get these younger people out. That objectivity, yes, but objectivity has to be subjective. Walter Rodney used to tell us that he hurried up to finish his PhD at 24 so that he can begin to subjectively use his history, right, to inform his region. That for him, education was political, right? It had a political function. There's no objectivity. He was never going to write a book about how Africa underdeveloped Europe, right? And he intentionally wanted to tell the story of development from the perspective of Africa and the dependent world. So I think the kind of work that we have to do is difficult work. History has never always been kind to us. Beverly, Venice, Grenada is celebrating 47 years, and we made a mess of Grenada from 79 to 83, and I think we're paying for it. I mean, we have to admit ourselves, right? There were human errors and political errors, and yeah, and we are paying for that to this day. We're paying for that, and we no longer have faith in movements. We no longer have faith in the collective. It's individualism, and I think we have to ride it through, and prepare for when that moment, because we always have to look for moments. But if you're blind, you can't see the moments. And I think part of it is that we're so culturally blind that when the moments come, we sometimes don't see it. But yeah, I mean, we got to continue doing this and begin to say things intentionally without fear of somebody saying you're crazy.
Yeah. Even if they say you're crazy, that's all right.
Yeah, no, right.
No, listen, some of the most brilliant people historically have been called crazy.
Yes.
It's not a bad label to wear when
Right.
you are on this kind of mission. And Professor, you have said something there, which really is one of the hinges on the other topic we had to talk about tonight, the COVID-19 situation in the region. Countries are handling this as individual countries instead of looking at the entire region to see how it could matter. It's now a numbers game. Grenada glad to say, oh, we only have 0 active cases. And look at St. Vincent. St. Vincent has over 1,000 active cases. And this one say, oh, not as bad as St. Vincent, we only have 500. And you hear this kind of stupid talk going across the Caribbean as if COVID-19 is not in the region and a serious threat to all of our health services, to all of our citizens. None of these islands can handle by itself a meltdown in relation to COVID-19. We have just been lucky, and I don't think it's lucky. I think this is another failing of the University of the West Indies in not using up all of those PhDs which are there to gather the data, gather and analyze the data as to why those infected in the Caribbean have not suffered the same fate as those in the US or in the UK or in Spain, where the death,
Brazil.
exactly where the death numbers have been very high. Why haven't our PhDs and the head of the university, Sir Hilary Beckles, who wastes far too much time talking about reparations as far as I'm concerned, why hasn't he garnered his troops and say, look, something is happening in the Caribbean. We need to get to the bottom of it, get the data, analyze the data, and let's see how we can use that to help us in our fight with COVID-19. COVID-19 not going anywhere fast. It's gonna
Can
be.
you back up? Can you back up? Look, I mean, I'm almost sure you finished saying that point where COVID is concerned. There can never be too much talk about reparations.
No. We have been talking about COVID-19 on MetroChat every week.
I'm saying there can be, you said that Beckles speaks, pay too much attention to reparation. And I'm saying,
No. I didn't say he paid too much attention.
What is it you said?
I said he spent far too much time talking about reparations when there are other important matters that he should be dealing with. You see? He doesn't always have to be the one out there talking about reparations.
But maybe that is the subject matter in that he loves the best. I don't think that Beckles is the minister of the Caribbean or the prime minister of the Caribbean.
No. And what I am putting in his corner is what he is responsible for. The University of the West Indies is supposed to be, among other things, a research university for the region. When things happen, when you're looking for data on anything, 10 years from now, when we're looking for COVID-19 data on the Caribbean, where are we going to find it?
So I am in agreement with you that the university should be looking to find this information. But exactly. I cannot understand why you would say that he spends too much time on reparations. That's all.
Because he does. Quite frankly, he does. You see? And okay. I don't hear, and I don't want to divert to reparations. We're talking about COVID-19. I don't hear coming from him how my ancestor money going to reach me when it comes to the Caribbean. You see? I don't stand to get a dime. As far as I'm concerned, it's nothing different from what is happening now. We just need some more money. Yes, England and then European countries, we could try and get it. That's not for me. That is not for no development in none of these countries. It will disappear just like all the other money that come into the region disappear. So forgive me if I'm not excited about reparations in this context. I want to hear how the little man up in Guam, as Dwyer say, how they can get some money. You see, how the people up in what the place in St. Vincent live, up in the Leeward where you have high levels of poverty, how them going to get some of them ancestors' money? I'm not interested in these people collecting no reparations if they were going to get it. Who going to get it? You think you and your put it on granddaughter getting any, not a dime.
But would
I mean, I know we don't want to digress into discussions of reparation, but I don't think it should be in the form of money. So that's a whole other discussion.
Exactly so.
I'm with
Right.
you on that one too. That's another discussion.
Absolutely so.
What I'm thinking in terms of the COVID and UE, seeing that they're doing so much good work on it in Cuba, might not it be useful for UE to strike up an alliance with the Cuban universities, the Cuban institutions, gather data, interpret it, work together, because that could help sew this fabric of regionalism together.
How does it look on your side? What are you saying?
Cuba is doing wonders in medicine. They're doing a lot of good stuff with COVID, we are told.
Yeah, to me, I'm not seeing myself up.
But you're very correct. What about the...
Sure whether you could see me.
That's Melania's, I don't know.
It's Melania's
Yeah. So I'm not hearing, and it's not just about COVID, but you don't really hear much out of UE. You know, you don't hear much out of UE like you used to. You know, again.
Well,
what's happening?
But that's the thing. I think one of the most disappointing things for me with UE, and I'm subject to correction, is that I haven't heard, for example, that the Faculty of Science and Technology across the institution has even attempted to develop a vaccine for the region. And let's say it failed, because lots of people have tried and failed. But we haven't even heard that UE as the premier research institution in the Caribbean has tried to develop a vaccine that would make it easy for Caribbean people.
But if it's not practical, Guevara, at least
but is it not
work
when
with the Cubans. But you can't compare UE with Jamaica with Cuba when it comes to medical research.
But UE is not Jamaica.
No. But the medical facility, are there other medical facilities for UE in the other islands?
Yes, Trinidad has a faculty of medical sciences, and so does Barbados.
Okay, fine. So, and everybody has the internet. So Cuba is on your internet right there. Then, in my view, if UE does not have the capacity on its own, then hang out with Cuba, learn with the guys in Cuba, and see how they develop things. It's not that you're competing.
They're afraid. They're afraid America will take away their visas.
Listen,
you're probably right, you know, man. Janet, you probably have a very good point.
Oh Lord, you know, Americans are now looking.
There, you know, there would be no Cuba.
Say that again.
If Trump had remained in power, there would have been no Cuba.
Oh.
If we're not careful, I mean, look at all of what Trump was putting to Cuba. Even at the end of his term, and he knew that he was leaving, him started thinking about terrorism where Cuba is concerned. You understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, he made sure.
Maybe they're not strong enough to put Cuba under, and the fact that Cuba can still get support from Russia. However, people who deal with Cuba are very careful because they know that they can get into problems as it relates to travel, etc., etc.
But Janet, all of us have students in Cuba. If it's one thing CARICOM is united on, it's Cuba. This is not taking a step into the fire. This is medical research. And if we offend the Americans a little bit more, fine, but I don't think it'll be that dangerous. That's just me. I could be wrong.
Well, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, and I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong either, do I?
Mhm.
I'm just saying that people may be a little wary of or worried that they may lose certain things if they get too close to Cuba. For instance, when we all heard what Cuba was doing with the vaccine, how many of our people were even thinking of asking Cuba to donate? Those were some of the questions I asked as a journalist in our press conferences. And the responses I was getting we weren't talking about Cuba. It's just recently when we see Cuba and Sister Cuba do so well and realize that other countries are accepting what Cuba has done. That is when we start and look how close we are, 45 minutes from Cuba.
Exactly. Exactly. This is a region, and it starts in the Bahamas, whether we like it or not, and it goes down to Guyana and Suriname, and we better understand that. And Cuba is in it.
But you see, while the region is united on Cuba, it is still, and I agree with Janet, it's still kind of, why isn't Cuba a member of CARICOM or CARIFORUM? We're afraid to have them as part of these organizations.
Yeah, you don't want to go too far.
Exactly, so still edgy. United but edgy. They can go in the UN and say away with sanctions. That is very safe. But outside of that, we need to take some more serious and more assertive action. It's like Haiti. Cyrus is here from Haiti, and we're very happy to have Cyrus as part of this group.
Yeah.
Because CARICOM alienates Haiti, and Haiti is a member.
Mm-hmm.
I keep talking about this 1st of March meeting they had at the beginning of COVID when they said, we're putting together a delegation to go to Haiti. And I laugh. I said, ain't go happen. And coming up to a year later, it has happened. Because there is not the will in CARICOM, and it's not just the language barrier. Because that is easy to get over. You walk with an interpreter. You have many people in the Caribbean who speak fluent French.
Yeah.
Take one of them with you. Or you have many Haitians who speak English, like Cyrus. So there is no excuse about the language. There is just not the will to embrace Haiti. And maybe all of its challenges that they would have to deal with it, the will is just not there. 1 year later, there is a CARICOM delegation to go and talk to Haiti about COVID. Ain't happening. Never will happen.
In fact, 2 months after CARICOM helped to put the Guyana government in power, they're chasing out 23 Haitians, and they're citing the fact that Haiti does not belong to the Caribbean single market and economy. And as a result of that, they're not entitled to the 6-month stay that other members of the thing. And they're doing that for ethnic reasons because Colombians are coming in, but they think that if Haitians set in Guyana, they're black so it gets caught up in the whole thing. They're not serious about integration. And so I take your point. It's not just the abandonment of Haiti, but it's also the manipulation that they do.
Yeah.
I think our leaders today they're into forms and not substance.
Not
Yes,
substance
that's
at all.
it.
Right? They're into forms.
Form over substance.
Yeah. Only this week I in my in my Caribbean class I was playing a speech by Michael Mann in which he says, they say we are angering America, but America is angering themselves. Haiti is a Caribbean country, and we are going to stand with Haiti. Definitive. Pay for it, right? But as Brian Meek said, Kissinger don't come to Jamaica and talk to Manley as he feel like Manley backs him out in face.
Exactly.
But our leaders don't have that, Manley start off by saying, Haiti, Cubans of the Caribbean, we will stand with Cuba and let America deal with it. Our leaders today are saying, boy, if we do this, the Americans will take. So they start off from the principle that we're all Caribbean. They start off what America could do. And I think that's a fundamental difference. They're into forms and not substance.
That is so true. So here we are now in a situation with everybody gearing up to get vaccines. St. Vincent getting enough vaccines, they say, by the end of the month is the promise. And I'm still looking at these delivery dates with salt in my eyes. Salt, well, I'm looking with salt in my eyes because I know that worldwide distribution is behind. We know that in these sort of situations, the people, a nation of 76,000 cannot go up against a nation of 76 million. There is no fair fight there. So although who has this program, this COVAX program for, equitable distribution and to ensure that everybody gets, I'm watching to see what's really going to happen because production is behind. They can't keep up with the orders that they have. So
I have every faith in Comrade Ralph, though. Again, and I'm being serious that he is going to lead the region again in securing the vaccines. We are having 50,000, I think, from COVAX and 8,000 from Russia, and he's getting 20,000 from another donor. I mean, that's 100,000 there.
So he's ensuring there's enough for every single person in St. Vincent.
Yeah, but he's not waiting. He's not waiting. He's doing what he does best. Who he has to beg to get it.
He's proactive.
Maybe that's
what I like about him as well, Graham. He's proactive.
Yeah,
he's proactive.
A lot of people may not like him, but let me tell you something. That man has energy.
Well, I mean, he's good at begging. You have to give him that. Where even if it sinks the country, he's good at begging. So, and he's set out this afternoon how it, and he has no shame. In the sense that he's saying, listen, I am begging this and that for 20,000 here, and and he said it plainly. We simply cannot wait on the COVAX system and whoever else to give us some vaccines. And it seems to be that he's willing to take it from wherever he can get it. So even if it's a mass production lab in India or somewhere, because he did mention that in his speech this afternoon, that both him and Prime Minister Skerritt are looking to get some vaccines from this lab in India that's producing the AstraZeneca vaccine, that he's willing to do that, and
yeah, we hear that good.
I wonder what he has to be given for it.
He has to pay for it. Unless the Indian government.
What he owes all these people now, what kind of debt he has put his people into.
He doesn't mind. He doesn't mind, because his thing is, once the people get the vaccine, we'll solve the debt problem later. So every budget he's moving from 17% now to 47% debt rate and all sorts of nonsense. The man does.
So apart from the debt rate, what has the science said about giving people who are actively infected the vaccine?
Oh, I'm not. Are they going to do that? Surely that's not possible. I mean, you don't even have to have medical training to know that. You shouldn't give anyone who is infected the
That
vaccine.
is exactly why I raised the question, because the numbers are running away in SVG. I would take the vaccine, but be smart enough to go and do a COVID test first to ensure you don't have the virus before they take the vaccine. With the wild, what I call, and tell everybody in St. Vincent, come for me, with the wild runaway of infections in St. Vincent, I would advise anybody who plans to take that vaccine to do a test first. Because you just know, St. Vincent has still not enforced any protocols for prevention. People going about, they have over 1,000 active cases and nobody knows where these people are. They're going about their business.
They're investigating.
It's an unannounced policy of herd immunity.
Yes, clearly. Clearly, at this stage. Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's an unannounced policy of herd immunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's exactly what.
I remember the CMO hinted at that last year.
You know? So when the 100,000 vaccines get there, you'll probably need to open your eyes and see what kind of transactions they'll be involved in if you already have herd immunity and you don't need it. Because at the rate that percent is going, by the time those vaccines get there in February, according to the date preferred, you'll have 3,000 or 4,000 known cases.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's not the Pfizer vaccine, so we'll be able to store it until we can give them out. He says Margaret looks up. He says he's buying a very expensive fridge to meet the storage requirements, and we're not having any Pfizer ones. I didn't hear any Pfizer vaccines being announced, so I suppose they'll be able to store them until they're able to use them.
But isn't the one Pfizer? No, the one
Pfizer is the one that's needs to store at -70, I think.
Yes. You remember the start with Sputnik?
Yeah. The ones that use the mRNA technology has to be stored at that temperature because it's encased in fat.
The Pfizer one?
Yeah, Moderna as well.
Oh, I didn't hear any. I think we're looking at Sputnik and AstraZeneca.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
we're having 8,000 doses of Sputnik. That's 4,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that?
From 1 shot or 2 shots? I can't remember reading. I can't remember.
I think this Sputnik is also a first vaccine and a booster.
The 1 shot one, is it ready for the market yet, Margaret?
I think Johnson & Johnson just announced that they were seeking emergency use. I think today. I think they are 1 shot. They just announced that they were seeking emergency use today.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Melanius, when is St. Lucia getting vaccines? Because that seems to be the race which is on now.
You mute.
You're muted. You have to unmute.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Interesting conversation. My apologies for the frequent breaks from the screen, and also there's an analogy that I go on: when clever people or smart people are speaking, you remain quiet and learn something. So that's what I've been trying to do all night. talking about vaccines, I think what is going on in the Caribbean as it relates to vaccines or even to St. Lucia is a joke. We will not get anywhere to inoculating half of the population or even of the entire Caribbean, much less an individual island, by August of this year. So I don't take or even spend much time listening to what the ministers of health or the prime minister of the region have to say, because we in Canada are struggling very much to keep up with the contracts that are assigned to Canada. And it was only this week that Prime Minister Trudeau signed another agreement with a Canadian company to try to get some vaccines manufactured. So what is going on in the region is really impractical. And I think our leaders, as have been said earlier on, they speak a lot of form, but very little substance. And that contributes to what's going on in relation to the COVID community spread in the islands. We're not getting the facts and the data distributed properly, and it's not being communicated to the people in order to make the necessary decisions and to change the module of life so that they can proceed. So I think we're in a very tight situation today. And also, Ron Sanders has a very interesting article, commentary on today in relation to that. But given the fact that CARICOM or the region has to have a united stance on that, we know what CARICOM is or what they stand for. And there is very little hope, as I said, that we can expect the Caribbean region to be inoculated fully by August. Because you see, it's very fundamental, no matter whether we have our personal understanding of whether we want the vaccine or not. If the population is not inoculated, and if we do not take control over the COVID situation right now, we cannot re-engage our economy. And like the professor said a while ago, we have a lot of smart economies, but they lack the thought process and the development along that line. So that is where I see this argument going. And if may I ask the professor a couple of questions as it relates to Guyana? Because as far as I'm concerned, Guyana is essential towards the forward thrust of the Caribbean in relation to its oil situation. So my questions are as follows. Professor, how do you see Guyana, or what sort of foreign policy pivot that Guyana should be looking at in relation to its oil reserves vis-a-vis America, Russia, China, and the geopolitics of the Caribbean? And secondly, I'm looking for a development plan, which is very fundamental to what will Guyana do or expect to do with the oil revenue, because this is fundamental. You can have cash and don't know what you're doing with it, and it will all finish before you really understand that, look, I had $1,000, what did I do with it? I stopped by the bar, I went to the supermarket, and it's all done. So this is very fundamental to the development of Guyana and also the region. How do they expect to spend the oil reserves, the cash they're going to get for the oil reserves, and how is that going to transcribe towards the development of not only Guyana, but the residual effect throughout the islands?
Thanks for the question. To your second question, there is no development plan in Guyana. Absolutely none. What they hope to do, there are two perspectives. The government that just left, which was predominantly led by the African Guyanese Party, they took the option of saving the money for the rainy days. And Professor Clive Thomas, who's probably known by some people here, argued that we should start by setting aside 10% of the money coming in to give directly to people in what is popularly known now across the world as cash transfers. That you put aside 10%, and you divide it up into each household. They've used it a lot in Latin America and Africa, and it's used in Jamaica. And they're doing a pilot study. I think the United Nations is doing a pilot study on the Eastern Caribbean right now on the use of cash transfer. The government that was in power at that time rejected it flatly. They argue that if you give the people money, they will smoke it out on drugs and rum and liquor and woman. And so it's a black middle class view of poor people. And I think it's pervasive in the Caribbean. So they feel that what you need to do is to spend the money indirectly and save it, because black people don't like slaves. They want to teach them to save. So there is that. Insofar as there is a vision, that's that. The party that is in power now, they are calling for the money to be spent. In fact, they're arguing, they went to Parliament today, and I think they're going to raise the debt ceiling, right? And their vision of where the money goes is to put the money in the hands of the entrepreneurs, the business people, the big business. And if you know anything about Guyana, the entrepreneurial sector is dominated by Portuguese and East Indians. Right? So it's a way of transferring the resources to the elite of those two ethnic groups. Whereas for the Black Party is you save it and give it indirectly, because those poor people can't spend it. Insofar as there's a vision, that's that. There's no pan-Caribbean vision, partly because ideology is a thing of the past in Guyana and the rest of the world. One of the the political leader of the party that just they didn't even want a manifesto. They didn't even want a manifesto. They feel it's a waste of time, right? These in the manifesto, you lay out some kind of vision of where you're going. That's an example to say that there's no vision. But here is some hope. Guyana strangely still retains a kind of progressive left critique. Right? The remnants of the WPA, the Rodney Party, we are still out there influencing public discourse and unabashedly pan-Caribbean, pro-working class. And we don't get any pushback in the societies, almost as if they've ceded that space to us. And so therefore the hope is that we influence a critical mass to demand a larger vision of what to do with oil. Now there is a discourse that is saying oil will bring no benefits to Guyana. The white people can carry everything, so don't even bother about it. Now, part of the problem with that is that poor people then are going to not pay attention, and whatever will come, they will pocket it, the elites, because the society, because of that discourse, is not excited about the new oil economy. So some of us have now decided to push back against that and to say to the society, but even after the teeth fall, for a population, a country with a population of 2 million and a region with about 5-6 million, we can still do miracles that we couldn't do before with it and all the weaknesses. So that we have now joined the discourse, and there are those competing discourses. But there is no overall plan about what to do with oil. And it's dangerous because, of course, there's always corruption where oil wealth is. But then there is no vision coming from those who hold power. It's worse. But like I said, the saving grace, if there is any, is that progressives still have a voice in. And it was really a coalition of the big PNC, and you had some small parties, and the WPA, Rodney Party, we were part of it, but we were totally shut out of any policy, any decision making, because whenever we spoke about decision making, we spoke about policy, and the men didn't want to hear about that policy. It's a pragmatic thing. You come up here, you have a problem, you solve it, and so on and so forth. So, no, there is no vision, but I think that we could get there because part of what has happened as a result of the election, and in concert with the new media environment, which is now pushed by this new technology, online and so on, I think a critical mass of the population has concluded for themselves that the politicians are a waste of time. I mean, that cause them thinking nasty and so on and so forth. Right? The thing is how to translate that now into a movement. It's scratching our heads over, right? And what it has done is, again, because of the technology and the media now, it has brought the diaspora really into the mix of the national politics. And so there's some possibilities there to generate a movement that is going to put enough pressure on them to come to some kind of plan for Guyana and for the region. We feel that it's dangerous for a Guyana-only plan for that oil, right? That it has to be a Caribbean plan. In that sense, your demands from the oil companies and so on become a demand for a larger share of the pie. If you're just demanding for Guyana, we feel that they are going to give into just this. And so there's a movement of encouraging Caribbean nationals to come into Guyana. Barbados has already begun to take advantage of that. And one of the things about Guyana, it has never really been hostile to Caribbean integration. Certainly not as hostile in other places. Any referendum in Guyana for we didn't have to go through that, but if you had a referendum in Guyana for CCJ, they'll pass easily. Partly because I think because of the progressive discourse, I think, that references the Caribbean a lot. So there's not, among the Indian population, there is some pockets of that, but I think generally there is not a lot of hostility to a Caribbean vision for oil. In relation to the geopolitics, that is more tricky. The Americans have clearly they've clearly taken a foothold. They're there, and also the other party. I think they have to work out an arrangement with the Americans, I think, right? In going forward, the oil companies, the British and American oil companies are very powerful, and as I said, the Chinese are also in the oil industry, but not as powerful as the Americans. But I think I would argue for a pragmatic foreign policy, and not necessarily the kind of progressive foreign policy that we would have argued for in the 1970s and the 1980s. I don't think there is a lot of space right now for that. So we'll have to have a kind of pragmatic foreign policy, certainly vis-a-vis the Chinese and the Americans. I always said when the Berlin Wall came down, if I met Mr. Gorbachev, I would have a lot of mouth to give him because he made life difficult for countries like the Caribbean countries. We don't have two superpowers to play against each other anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So I would think that what I would argue for in Ghana. Now I don't know that the rulers are doing that again because we have these politicians that have no sense of anything larger than what is before them. They can't read fine prints. You know you have to put the letters big for them. And so I think again we have to have a critical mass in the society and a movement to really push them in the direction of having a pragmatic foreign policy with the Americans and the Chinese, and make sure that we don't go for one or the other.
So that tells me that not knowing what we want, not knowing how we're going to use the offshoot of the oil revenue or the development of Guyana and the region, and without a coherent pragmatic policy, as you put it, we're heading nowhere, because in actual fact we do not know what we want.
Yes. And I think there is a really deeper analysis one can make of that. And I mentioned early in the night, and here I think Ralph is critical. Some of my colleagues push back against Ralph referring to the Caribbean as a civilization. And they say, man, to say you're a civilization and I think, it echoes sentiments of the colonial civilization and so on. And I think we have to see ourselves as big, all right? If we don't see ourselves as big, we are not going to be able to think big, right? When Marichaux and Critchlow and them came back, they passed through Europe and they attended one of Du Bois's Pan-African Conference in 1919. He had held it in France, but they were there for a meeting. And they came back to the Caribbean and they were talking about Caribbean independence. They were talking about aid and so on. This is 1919. Right? They're thinking big because they see themselves, having gone out to Europe, they were exposed to the Pan-African sentiment. And so they begin to think in big terms, which is what we mean by vision, right? And our leaders, I think that's where we are falling down constantly. So there was no anticipation of oil in Guyana. Although we knew we had oil and we were trying for years, there was no anticipation of it. So when it came, right, we are now following the oil. You see? And so I'm making the argument there that them, and I think the rest of the Caribbean can look at this. We didn't learn from Trinidad.
Yep.
Fumbled and stumbled. Guyana never learned from Trinidad. And so I'm saying the rest of the Caribbean, perhaps it's a wake-up call to say that we, Lamin would say that, we can't determine the price of oil or the price of sugar on the world market, but we can determine who we are and who we want to be, right? Mm-hmm. And I think if you begin to do that when unexpected wealth comes, you are in a better position to say what you want to do with it, right? So I know we beat up on the politicians and I beat up on them too, but I think part of it is the legacy of the plantation thing that, we walk from, live from today to tomorrow. And I think that we now have to start thinking in 20-year terms and and 40-year terms like them big country and so on. Even though we may not make it, but yes. So yes, there is no vision, but like I said, I don't think all is lost because for some strange reason, all the left wing, the radical left wing parties in the English-speaking Caribbean are now dead. All of them. Ralphus merged with the Labour Party. Hector people are now in the UPP, and so on and so forth. All of them. WPJ, Trevor is now in the PNP. The WPA remains not the party it used to be, but it's there, right? And it's the only one that's there. I can think it has to do with the nature of the Guyanese society, thing, and so on and so forth. And having a lot to say about oil, and I think that there is a modicum of hope there that we can develop something.
Appreciate. But that also takes us into the COVID scenario, because if we as a Caribbean region do not know or have a lesser appreciation of our development and of ourselves and what we need to do, how are we going to coexist, or I don't like to use that word coexist with COVID, how are we going to exist in an environment of vectors and increasing medical concerns, and even in a scenario where oil will be transferred, or we have to move into the solar complex and into high technology. That is already being talked about, because I think by 2035 or thereabout, vehicles will no longer be predominantly maneuvered by gas. It will be batteries and propane and different environments that we go into. So what type of Caribbean are we looking to live in, and where are the minds going to come from among what's left among us in order to propel such, and not leave it to the dead brains that we have there right now?
Well, I appreciate that question tremendously. We have journalists here, we have educators here. I think we have to be intentional in creating what you're talking about. If a Caribbean student comes to me and say, Professor, I'm looking to figure out what I will study for my master's thesis, I said, study the Caribbean. And when I'm lecturing on the Caribbean, I lecture with a bias on the Caribbean, because I'm thinking about what you're talking about there. So whether we are journalists, whether we're educators, in whatever sphere of interest, we have to be intentional about, we used to use the word in the old days and say brainwash, right? I don't want to use that, but we have to be intentional about creating this Caribbean person, all right, who is going to take us there. Because you're right, when COVID is finished, the world is changed. And Dwyer's question about the university is the fact that UE is not looking at developing a vaccine, is because we don't think that that's our role. We don't, the Americans will do it, the Russians will do it, but Cuba is doing it. And that's why Cuba is so far ahead of the rest of us. They're intentional about what they do. Of course, that raises question of civil liberties and civil rights and so on, which Caribbean people are very jealous of for good reason. But there has to be some intentionality. And I'm not saying dictatorship and authoritarianism and banging things in people's heads, but I think there has to be some intentionality.
Thanks.
But David, Professor,
yes,
I believe one of the things that propelled Cuba through its creativity and its successes was the very pressure that has been applied on it from day one.
Yeah.
I think by contrast, we in these other countries have not felt the pressure. This is why I said this delusion that we suffer from the night we pulled down the Union Jack and hoisted our own. We felt that was the end of the road, the end of the pressure. Cuba started feeling pressure since what, 58?
Yes.
Relentless pressure. Relentless. They got quite a bit of help from the USSR, it is true. Canada was always a friend of Cuba and some other countries, but by and large, the Cubans were pushed against the wall, and they did a heck of a good job. The heck of a good job, and they could not afford to lose people. And maybe you'll say some of the moves they made in terms of emigrating were harsh. Maybe even, yeah, but you have to look at your survival. You're under all of these pressures and all of these embargoes, and you don't want to sort the people out of the country. So maybe we should educate our people into understanding that we are under pressure. We are deluded that we are not, but we are under pressure because we're not doing enough for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And when you give the man the option to do something for you, he's gonna do something to you. Not for you.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's what's happening.
Yes, guys, we have gone over time. Way over time. Professor, you know we're gonna invite you back to this program. As a matter of fact, you are welcome to join us anytime you feel like. You don't even have to for an invitation from us. And I thoroughly enjoyed the history lessons. We have our viewers on Facebook who are chiming in. So all of your suspects, go in the chat, look on the comments, and please respond because we're not able to take them on air tonight because we are over time. Thank you for your participation. Thank you so much, Professor Hines, for being here. And all of you suspects, you know we have a lot of work to do. When we leave here, the work is not ended, it's just begun. All right, so until next week, same time, same place, we get together again to look at more issues that affect us in the Caribbean and how we can solve those problems. Good night, folks, and have a
good morning. Bye.
Good morning to you. Yes, good morning.
Nice seeing you, brother.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Yeah.
Take care. Yes, thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Adriana, bonsoir.
Good night.
Adriana is sleepy. She's ready to go.
No, Adriana, listening, man.
I was
See you guys.
enjoying the program.
I know. I listened a whole lot.